Hello and welcome back to On Volume 6, a channel designed around bridging a gap between orthodox Jungian psychological theory in terms of psychological types and bridging that sort of the precipice, the chasm, if you will. I'm trying to prevent a schism per se by mending fences ahead of time in terms of what connects orthodox Jungian psychological theory with objective personality theory in terms of what's implied about the nature of a what is implied about the nature of a psyche, and that includes psychological functions as well as people as well as individuals, talking about an actual psychological type. And we can carry this forward into common notation and formal notation. We decided to write out all 16 psychological functions in the objective personality system, all 8 in the orthodox Jungian psychological types community in terms of Jungian theory. What are we talking about? We're talking about visualizing type in the OPS system. Where do you start? And I wrote these two different pieces of notation out. And I said, okay, as common notation, feminine NI, this is what I originally thought that I was in the objective personality system. I thought this was my self-type. My self-type was feminine introverted intuition, feminine extroverted thinking, masculine introverted feeling, and masculine introverted sensation. So as you can see, even at this level of visual representation, we're already using type shorthand. Does that make sense? Does that go as far as to explain how difficult it is to talk about psychological functions and psychological types? Not in terms of information that we can think of, because I have to assume that you're coming from the perspective of orthodox Jungian theory. But I can't even assume that much of a basis. I have to assume that as a stepping stone to get you to understand objective personality theory. And why is that so difficult? Why is that so difficult? Because I feel like I boxed myself in. This is my type in the objective personality system. This is my actual type. But is that true? Let's move from common notation to formal notation. Visualizing type in the OPS system. Okay, so in the objective personality system, my type is M, F, N, E, T, I, consume, sleep, blast, play. Social type number 3. This is what we refer to as formal notation. When we talk about a psychological type and we talk about a psychological function, those elements are different. This is my official OPS typing, which is still subject to change if there's any revisions throughout life. Now, I maintain the hypothesis that psychological functions do not change during lifetimes. It's just the diagnostic criteria that we're using that remains fluid in determining a psychological function from a psychological type. So in this case, we're talking about my type, and this is why I said it's in common notation. This makes me want to go to search some images. Okay, so we're stumbling through, and we come out with this chart. But this is an orthodox Jungian psychological functions chart. But this is the visualization that we would use to describe the type function interactions. So because this is consume, sleep, blast, play, right? What are we talking about? We're talking about Jungian theory. We're talking about objective personality theory. We walked through the beginning of the theory. Attitude, introversion or extroversion. We didn't go too deep into it in terms of actually explaining in Jung's work, volume 6, hey, like where does Jung start with this assumption that there's a such thing called an attitude orientation, and it underwrites our psychic energy in terms of our libido. Where do you go with that as a baseline? So we dealt with attitude orientations, and then function types, and then we wound up with our 8 psychological functions in an orthodox context, and then we multiplied them by 2 by dividing them, we multiplied them by 2 by using a splitter's conception on masculine and feminine functions. So we split extroverted feeling into 2, feminine extroverted feeling and masculine extroverted feeling. Split them in 2 like we were cleaving off a mirrored pair. As you can see, it's just like I copied and pasted the same exact ordered list, and I pasted it beneath, and the first pair was feminine, the second pair was masculine. So we're splitting these psychological functions in two. That's a part of the theory. And next we're at common notation versus formal notation. This right here is formal notation. Okay, so this is my type. That just got really hard to see. But we can zoom in. This is my type in the orthodox Jungian psychological functions community. It will be NETIFESI. NETIFESI. So what does this have to do with anything? You might be asking yourself the question, what does this have to do with formal notation versus common notation? Well, in terms of our starting point, we start by saying where I started in terms of visualizing an objective personality system type 512. So I started with my own type. I started in terms of formal notation. And then I branched out to common notation. I tried to label each individual function. Then let's continue naming the functions, and I'll pick that back up soon. Okay, so we're jumping back into on volume 6, the recap. Okay, so we're jumping into, what are we talking about here? We're talking about volume 6 of the collected work of Carl Gustav Jung. We're working on visualizing type in the objective personality system, and we've come up with this in terms of common notation, in terms of formal notation. This right here is this right here is formal notation. This is common notation. Even this is common notation. Why? Because it doesn't represent a type. Until next time.